Welcome to Inner Niña podcast, embracing your inner child while leading with strength. This is a space for Latina women and beyond who are ready to break generational cycles and lead from a place of wholeness. Together, we will reconnect with the little girl inside, the one who dreamed big, felt deeply, and longed to be seen, and honor her as we step in fully into our power. Join me, Magda Fernandez, for heartfelt reflections and empowering conversations about identity, healing, culture, and leadership. Each episode invites you to embrace your inner niña while leading with authenticity, compassion, and courage. Welcome back to Inner Niña. Today we welcome a special guest and accomplished Latina leader, Magda Fernandez. Magda was born in Nogales, Arizona, where she lived until the age of 19. Her parents are both immigrants from Mexico. In 1994, she joined the United States Coast Guard and retired in 2018 after completing 23 years of combined active and reserve service. She currently serves as a chief of police and public safety for the Port of San Diego Harbor Police Department, a position she was appointed to in May of 2022. Having worked for the port for nearly 25 years, she is deeply honored to serve as the first Latina chief of police in San Diego County. Welcome, Magda. Thank you for joining us today and being part of our Inner Niña community. How are you today, love?
I'm great. Thank you for hosting me. What an honor.
I am honored to have you here. So one of the beautiful things about our San Diego community, we get to do a lot of events, and in the process, we get to meet a lot of incredible Latina leaders. I was fortunate to meet this beautiful lady doing one of the MANA events, and she shared a little bit of her stories, her struggles. She leads in that particular role as a Latina in the police department. And I was really impressed, and I'm like, I need to know more about her stories, because we all as Latina leaders have a commonality when it comes to the struggles that we deal in leadership roles. And her struck me a little bit more because she has a very important role, and she has a little bit more of a challenge being in that particular role, especially a female in a uniform. So I wanted to tell us a little bit about that journey and her story. So this is an opportunity for us to hear more. And I wanted to hear a little, maybe for my self-interest, because I wanted to hear more. We never got a chance to get together because we had a pending conversation and life happens. And then when this opportunity came with the channel, I said, I need to get a hold of her. And fun fact, I did send her a message that sat in her inbox for a while. And then out of a sudden, I think few weeks later, she reached out. She's like, oh my God, I just got your message. I said, I was giving you a couple more weeks before I start stalking you because I really wanted to hear her story. And this is an opportunity not only for me to hear it, but for everybody that's out there. So thank you so much for making time today.
Absolutely.
With us today. So tell us about who you are, a little bit of your background, and what are you working on?
Well, like you said, Magda Fernandez, I think I'm probably one of the few Latinas that only has two names. I don't have a middle name, which I thought was interesting. And it's interesting because my mom wanted to name me Maria Magdalena Fernandez, and my dad was like, nope, Magda Fernandez, that's it. So it's interesting. So that kind of paints the picture of what my household was. I did grow up in Nogales, Arizona. It borders Nogales, Sonora. And I grew up in both communities because I have a lot of family there still. And I grew up predominantly with my mom, my dad, and my brother. My mom's sister also was there. She's kind of like my second mom, and she still lives with me. So my mom and her sister live with me. I grew up in a very traditional home, de Mexicanos. Parties every Sunday, right? Family gatherings, but very much a traditional Mexican household. My mom was very much with gender roles. I had a brother, and those roles were very clearly divided. So it was interesting. My dad was not traditional, which I thought was interesting. He would always tell me, "Ay, mija, reach for the stars. This world is your oyster, and you can do whatever you want." And he was like, nomás, he said, if you make $1, don't spend $1.25, right? You can only spend 50 cents. And that's kind of how he raised both me and my brother. And but he was like, you want to go out there and do your work, go do it. There's nothing here for you in Nogales. You have to explore outside, and the only thing I can ever leave you is your education. So I decided to join the military, and that was a big issue because girls don't join the military. I wanted to be a firefighter. Girls weren't firefighters. And part of that was when I applied to be a firefighter, they told me, in case you haven't noticed, and this was in the early 90s, here we are firemen and policemen. If we wanted you to be in the service, then we would have fire women and police women, right? And I was like, I don't get it, because I was never, even though I had gender roles and I thought the girls learned how to cook and clean, I never thought that my career would be impacted by a gender role. So I fought through it. I got hired. I was able to join a volunteer fire department where I was actually able to become a firefighter and became an EMT. And that's kind of what catapulted my career in emergency services and public service. And I kept finding a lot of roadblocks. And I said, I got to get out of here. I'm never going to go anywhere with this machismo style of where the only I can give you 1,000%, but I don't get anything for it because it's volunteer service. But I got a lot of experience. So I was also a volunteer search and rescue diver. At that time, I was 18. And one of the guys that I went, we did body recoveries out of lakes. And one of those guys that I was diving with said, what are you doing? Like, you need to be rescuing people. Go join the Coast Guard. I'm like, that sounds amazing. So I did. At a tender age of 19, I left my nest. I left everything I knew. I left the culture, the language, the food, everything behind, and traveled to Cape May, New Jersey, where I was in culture shock. And, that was early 90s, and that was really hard. And went into boot camp, a very structured environment for military. And then after that, I got stationed in Hawaii. But it was rough because, women in the service was not a thing. And, you cooked and you cleaned and you were expected to iron uniforms for the aviators. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I was like, I didn't do it at home. I'm not doing it here. What is wrong with you people? So I got lucky while I was in the service. I got good jobs. I got assigned to the Hawaiian Armed Services Police. And that's where I kind of got my taste of the police department. And Honolulu at the time was very closed environment for joining the police department. I did 6 years of active duty in the Coast Guard out there, and they were very hard years. I went through a lot of trauma. There was a lot of hardship because I was alone. I was naive. I was young. I was dumb to some extent, right? So some of the life lessons came really hard, and the Coast Guard is still going through it. I was a victim of sexual assault out there. And when you tell your family I was assaulted sexually, the first thing out of their mouths like, hey, well, what were you wearing? Like, that changes anything? Like, that gives people a right? And I kind of went through that. So it's a double trauma that you have to go through, and you gotta fight through it and figure it out. And I left Hawaii and I never wanted to go back, and came back here to the States, to the mainland, and got a job as working in a law office. And that was hard. I didn't know anything. I had just gotten married. I was pregnant. This was in 2000. I think Joseph was born in 2001. No, that's a lie. He was born in 2000. And, I gave birth to Joseph, and then my husband essentially left me. So I was left as a single mom of an infant. So I had to move back in with my parents and figure it out. I had to figure it out. And then the military called and said, hey, you have to finish your contract. So I came out to San Diego, and I came out here without my baby, I came here with the clothes on my body and had to figure it out. I signed up for active duty. I did it for a year, had enough money where I could rent an apartment. And then I applied to the Harbor Police, and I got hired. And that's kind of what changed my trajectory, my life. Went through a lot of hardships in the police department, but because I did, I think it made me stronger, better, where I could assume the role of a police chief and change the culture within that organization up and flip it upside down, where it was leading from the bottom up and the top down. So it's a quick synopsis of my life, but and I'm happy to fill in the gaps. But yeah, it's been a challenge. You asked me what I'm working on right now. Is I'm continuing to work on developing myself and how I can help people be better versions of themselves. I want young Latinas to see themselves in me. So we do a lot of work within the community. The Harbor Police adopted Perkins Elementary School, which is predominantly kids that are experiencing homelessness. So those kids and their families need a lot of help. And we help with education. We help with classrooms, furnitures. We help with giving them experiences. We just hosted a tour on the bay. We did jujitsu with a cop. And I just want these young kids to see themselves in me or in my staff and gain the trust of law enforcement, because there's a lot of distrust, especially in the Latino community. So, and it's a lot of work to regain that trust back. And sometimes you're not seen as a police officer. You're not even seen as a Latina. You're seen as a traitor, right? Because you're working for the other side. So
Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to kind of cover a couple of the items that you just shared. First and foremost, thank you for service, for serving and sacrifice. It is a sacrifice when you serve the country. I'm a military wife, so I know that firsthand, and I totally understand that process. Second, being vulnerable and sharing your experience. One of the things I can say this channel has open is a very safe space because sometimes when we see each other very polished. We see this, right? We're almost like an Instagram image, right? They don't see the things that we go through, the battles that we've had to fight, the nights that we spend crying because we battle all the things in life. You went through something very horrible, and we have a lot of guests that has also shared their experience, and I'm glad that we're speaking out because I want to give a voice to that kind of trauma. And the reason I do that is because we have a lot of young girls that are growing up in an environment that maybe you and I grew up in, where like, no digas nada, stay quiet, don't let anybody know. And I'm trying to change that through my own kids. With the girls I come across, like it's important for us to speak up and speak loud and know that if we can't speak at home, find a community that you can trust to make sure you don't go through it alone. Because the worst thing is having to go through a trauma, and you go through a trauma more than once, right?
oh
Because
yeah,
you get victimized, and then depending on your family, like you mentioned, what were you wearing? Or it's probably your fault. You probably provoked them. You probably did something. And instead of getting that support, we get blamed for something that we had no control over. So I thank you for sharing that. Did you ever get a chance to speak up, do something regarding that unfortunate event?
no, nobody believed. So back then, it was really hard, until this day, sexual assaults in the military, although they take them more seriously, holding people accountable is very hard. It is very, very hard. And I wasn't sexually assaulted by a random person. I was sexually assaulted by a police officer. So it's even harder to prove, right? It's even harder for people to believe that that happened, especially from somebody in a position of trust. That was really, really hard. I did not deal with it well. That trauma didn't resurface until years later. And as myself as a police officer, those type of cases were very hard, and I took them to heart because I could empathize and sympathize with the victim, and I took it to heart, and I was like, yep. She's not going to go through what I went through. What I did was I launched an educational campaign to all the women that were coming to the base, and essentially launched a campaign against police officers to say you can't trust them, don't let them buy you drinks, don't go out with them to the clubs, don't befriend them. In uniform they might be fine, but outside of uniform that's not the case, right? And it's unfortunate because that created my image of law enforcement. Even though I still wanted to be a police officer, I was like, but I can't trust my partners. I was very much conflicted on what to do. But, my dad always told me, you want to make a change, you put yourself in a position where you can make change. And this was, for me, my mission to become that police officers that could make that change. I can make the change and have impact on victims, and I can make and try to have change within the culture of an organization and how they treat victims.
And I'm glad that you said that. Actually, I was in an event yesterday with a group of incredible women who are survivors of so much, so much. And I was telling them I was going to have a special episode, that I was looking forward to have this episode. And you just touched on something that we had a conversation about yesterday, because there is a stigma, right? Like I see you and I know, Magda, I can see you in a uniform, but I didn't see the uniform when I met you. That makes sense. I saw you. I think I connected with you at a person level. But I know people that have had a really bad experience with the uniform. It's hard for them to see past the uniform. So when I was having the conversation with them, and I was talking to one of the activists, he's like, "Well, our girls don't need to see a Latina and see themselves in uniform." I said, "Why not?" Because these are girls that are at risk youth. They're going through their struggles. I was talking to in that group. There was a couple that were telling me that there's a couple of them are homeless, and their struggles because of the family dynamic. They have no control. And so what I was telling him, I said, wouldn't it be nice if we get the people that I'm interviewing, create this a community so we can kind of get to know each other and find a ways to help each other. Forget what we look like. If we have an opportunity, change what you can, because you have an opportunity to change. And if we all get into a mentality to change a little bit, then we can leave our guard down a little bit so we can help each other, change that stigma, right? But people don't know that unless we share those stories and say, wow, I was that too, right? And those are the important things that it's important for us to share, because if not, we're not able to help each other in the community. And instead of
No.
creating that bond, it creates a division.
And because both sides, right, refuse to come to the table and have honest and open conversations. And when we can't see beyond, when you talk to police and you're like, "Oh, we're going to have a meeting with a bunch of activists," they're like, "Ew, okay, how is this going to go?" But we got to work together. And what I told my people, and I've drilled this into everybody in my department, I incorporated in my speeches, I incorporated in my messages to my new officers. When I do speeches to the whole academy classes, I tell them the word you use matter, and how you leave people feeling matters, regardless of their situation, right? Because what I tell people, it's like, as a police officer, sometimes you're the guardian with with wings that comes to rescue people. But that rescue shows up in many different forms, in many different ways. It's not always pulling somebody out of a burning car, right? And you're the hero. It's when you talk to somebody in the community and you can relate and you can share that story by the words that you use and how you leave them feeling. I said, I can't tell you how many times when you treat somebody who made a mistake, right? Criminals are humans, and we got to look at them as people, as somebody's, father, son, cousin, sisters, mothers. Name the title. They're attached to a family member. And if you put yourself in that thought process of situation safe, how are you going to communicate? How are you going to leave them feeling? Because if you leave them feeling like they have hope, right? That they made a mistake, that there's a way out of it. This is not how your story ends, right? There's rehabilitation. If you treat them poorly for whatever reason you have, that's how they're going to remember you and the police department, and how they're going to perceive the rest of their life, right? So the words that you use matter, and how you leave people feeling matters. And that's what I tell people at work. It's like, you can say the same thing 1,000 different ways, and we can communicate with all walks of life, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what their stories are, and be human to them.
Yeah, give them
That's
a
the
chance to
culture I'm trying to
explain.
change.
And I was actually just had a conversation with my husband today because I was talking to him about some of the people that I'm encountering in this process. I'm like, they all deserve a second chance. Because to your point, right, we don't know what they were going through at that moment. The circumstances that created that time in their life where the best choices weren't made, but they deserve a second chance. And sometimes we need more than a second chance. But to try to understand the person is what we need to do more than just talk to them, explain. We can agree to disagree. I would say we need to, it's okay for us to agree to disagree, but let's try to at least try to understand each other. How can we meet in the middle to make this happen? Because you also have the same interests. You're pro people. You want to help your community. And I know that for a fact about you, right? And so coming together, I think, is making progress. And so that's what I'm hoping we can get out of sometimes this platform, because we're getting to meet a lot of different Latinas in different roles. When I was having this conversation, I said, the incredible women I'm meeting in this platform, we are healing the communities because we're focusing with people that are dealing with like domestic abuse, sexual abuse, gangs, police, Latina authors. There's so many of us in different trades that are taking care of our families in all levels within the families, right? And so we have our own little community. So I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot going on in San Diego. I know I don't live in San Diego, but I'm like, invite me and I'll go and participate in anything I can do to help. And then I'll connect you with the hermanas that I know or friends that I know that are also in nonprofits or can make a difference, so we can all collaborate. So it's important for that. I know that your role is very challenging in itself. What is one of the biggest challenge that you had to deal with from the beginning and that you still have to deal with today?
I think when people doubt you, right? So inherently, I think as a woman, I see this all the time, is that when we get appointed into these executive positions, people automatically assume that you are the DEI pick, right? That the only reason you were picked is because they need to, get a woman in there. They need to get a Latina or woman of color. Pick your reason. It's never because of your skill set. And when that surfaces, right now you have to work 3 times, 4 times, 5 times as hard to prove that you are worthy of this position, right? So let me give you the landscape. Is I'm a chief and I'm the female. I have an assistant chief, I have 2 captains, and I have 6 lieutenants, all men. When I took over as a chief, I think we had 12 females. Now we're up to 26 females within the department I'm pretty sure it's 26 now. So our numbers have doubled, but we haven't changed a lot, right? I mean, what I changed was being very intentional with the women in the department to saying, you know what? Why aren't you part of our SWAT team? Why are you not part of our fire instructor cadre? Why are you not a police diver? Why not? Like, you have what it takes. You have to apply. You have to train just as hard, if not harder, right? You have to do good in the interviews. You have to do good in the testing. Happy to send you to test, to prep for all of these things, just like we do for the men. So now I have firefighter instructors. I have women trying out for SWAT. I have all these different positions that predominantly have been male. Because in order for people to see me, or to actually see them, that they are capable of doing it, because I think there's women in my department that have the potential of being a chief one day, we have to normalize these roles at the junior positions and give the women those opportunities. I never had those opportunities, right? I fought for the opportunities that I had, but it's been hard. So being the only female amongst a leadership team that's men, and I'm working on the women, but they have to go up the ranks. I just can't appoint them from officer to lieutenant. That's not how that works. But I think in time, I have great women in the ranks of sergeants that I think when they're lieutenants, they're going to be really good in that role. But that doesn't happen without somebody like me being in that position, trying to change that culture of how women are seen in these positions of leadership that 100% have to do with your skill sets and not by the way you look, right? And obviously, there's always pay issues and there's differences of pay. Yes, I am the chief of police and I'm supposed to be the one that makes the most, but it doesn't always work out that way, right? So those are other stories. So those are some of those challenges, is really getting looked at, being looked at as somebody that's competent and qualified to do the job versus just because you're a girl, you got this position, and feeling sometimes like an imposter.
I think we all have that. But I think it's key to say that when you start your career, that's one of the things that you had to overcome, right? They automatically were chastising you because it wasn't a female role. So you were like, it's almost like you were encroaching into their boy group, right? Their boy, whatever.
I'm not part of the boys club, but
We're not part of the boys club. But the fact that you're at where you're at, you're opening the doors, you're creating those opportunities, and you're creating that visual for the women. Oh, that's possible. Like I talked to you before we started recording, it's like part of that is you already changed the landscape, right? You change it to the opportunity where people know, the women know, like that is possible because they don't need to crash
ceiling,
the glass ceiling. You already did it. And you remember one of the conversations you and I had years ago when we first met, we were talking about pay inequities because we both have experienced it. We talked about my challenges as an HR, highly educated because I had all my degrees and my certifications like you. We have to work twice as hard. But I've had to witness male counterparts with less credentials getting paid more than I was and had to stand ground on that because it wasn't fair. But imagine the women that don't have the tenacity to speak up, right? And so we have to almost sometimes do it for them as well. I do remember one special story you shared with me that's kind of like stayed with me since then. And we've shared that a couple of times when we've talked, is when people see you, and this happens not just in your role, but it happens with a lot of women in leadership role, well, they look like us and they see a male counterpart, maybe in a lesser role, right? In a more junior leadership role. They assume that they're the ones in charge and not you because you look like you. And you actually had me laughing when you shared the story. And I don't want to go into the story, but you remember the story that you shared with me, and it was the male counterpart. I don't want to describe him because you actually described. He was standing right next to you when he mentioned that, when you were telling me the story.
Yeah, so typically my assistant chief, he's tall, he's white, and he has 3 stars. I have 4 stars. That's just the rankings, right? But when I meet people who are not, that are not part of law enforcement and they don't understand the rankings, they make assumptions that either I'm his assistant or that I work for him, and they never talk to me. They talk to him first. And there's been multiple occasions when we go to either conferences and then you're dealing with vendors. The vendors want nothing to do with me, right? One, because I'm the girl. I probably don't know what they're talking about. I don't understand the mechanics or whatever. And when I go talk to vendors, in my mind, I have an idea of specifically what I'm looking for, the specs I'm looking for. I think in one particular case, I was looking for cameras, like standalone cameras that have the lighting and Okay, so I was looking for that and I knew exactly the dimensions, the type of camera I wanted. And we're talking to the vendor, and the vendor, I keep asking him questions like, hey, talk to me. Do you have the this and the that? And does it do this thing and that thing? And the vendor would not look at me, would look at Jeff, is my counterpart or my assistant chief. He's like, why are you talking to me? She's the one that can make the decisions and has the money to pay for it. And the guy's like, oh, I was like, well, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for your contributions here. We're out. So I went with another vendor because that vendor actually talked to me and was like, oh, I'm interested. But yeah, so it's been on multiple occasions that if I'm with him, they talk to him.
You know, the
And
funny thing about that, I think we get a little bit of that training growing up, especially in a machisto environment, because I used to get that a lot. We were considered the second class citizen growing up because the men could do no wrong and we almost didn't have any value. And I have experienced that with my husband. A couple of examples I have is when we go car shopping. And they go to him, the salesperson approach him and they want to show the car. And my husband's like, why are you talking to me? I'm just here to check on the car to make sure it works. She's the one buying it. Go talk to her. But the minute they disregard me is the minute I turn around and I walk away and go somewhere else. Right. And so, but I'm kind of used to it because that's been my experience growing up is the sexist machista way of thinking. And it doesn't change when you're in a corporate environment in most cases, especially when we're dealing with men and ego, right?
well, yep. And I have 3 boys. I'm raising 3 boys. Well, I've raised 3 boys. They're all adult men now with their own careers. One of them is in law enforcement and he works for the sheriff's department. And obviously the sheriff of San Diego County is female. And I told him, I said, don't you ever underestimate the power of a woman and you respect that. And they do because they grew up with me. They grew up with my mom and they grew up in a predominantly female led household. And then being the chief of police and now him working for the sheriff's department, he has a very different perspective of women in leadership. And I really think that that's the key to start turning this sexist nonsense around, right? We treat all people equal, men or women.
But
So
unfortunately, that doesn't always work like that because bad behavior gets recognized and rewarded in
yeah,
an environment. People don't want to be held accountable. And as long as you have that bad behavior being excused, then we're going to keep having the problems. And also the fear of women being able to speak up when they feel there's no protection, right? And they know that no matter how hard they work, if they're going to be overlooked, they're going to continue doing the work and the ones are going to get promoted and compensated. It's almost discouraging at times, right?
I tell the women in my department, 'cause some kind of have similar backgrounds, and I said, look, what we tolerate is what we condone, right? We give them permission to continue to use those words or continue to treat people that way, and until we stand up and said enough is enough. Obviously, you have to have that backing, that support, and that's what I have to do for women in my department sometimes.
Well, I'm glad that they have you for support and leadership. That really makes a difference. Your role is something I really admire because we don't have enough roles that are Latina led, right? And we're trying to change that. In this platform, we're kind of identifying the numbers that we're trying to increase. Latinas with higher education, Latina authors, Latina in key roles. And the more we have pictures of women like you in those roles, the more the girls can visualize themselves as the possibilities, right? Because we didn't have that. Imagine if you were to think when you were a little girl and you're the first Latina in that role. I mean, how would you have imagined that you one day be in that role yourself? You have no one to say, hey, I want to be like her.
No, but I took my dad's words to heart, right? So if you want to make a change, then put yourself in a position where you can make that change. And for me, that was very important. Despite all the challenges, despite all the trauma, despite, the blood, sweat, and tears that I went through to even be able to wear that uniform, and unfortunately for women, sometimes women are our worst enemies, right? We are our own worst enemies when it comes to being successful. Sometimes women don't want to see other women be successful. And that's really hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to process. It's hard for me when women get catty because another woman is being successful or they start talking and the chismes and the rumors. And I struggle with that really hard. And it's just like, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to speak or try to claw down other women to a lower level? I know it's probably part of our reptilian brain that's somewhere deep in our DNA, but I think we have to support each other, and that's key. And you know, it's hard when people do that, or when women do that to women. So fighting that and trying to change that and trying to unify women is my goal. Thankfully, I have a good group of women at my department that they all support and help each other, and they study and they have reading clubs and they do all these things as independent women, which is good. It's in the outside that you see it. And, you know, sometimes I deal with it from other women.
I love that you're saying that because we've covered a couple of these topics in different episodes, right? And we called it, one of the episodes, one of the guests called it La Tóxica Behavior. It's stuff that we learned, right? It's like, this is before we had like the TV and then cell phones. We had like chismosas from the neighborhood that the gossip ran wild. It was like they ran faster than the Santa Ana winds on the days where the wind blows fast. We're trying to change that. And one of the things I tell my guests, and I can only control me, right? So my intention is I have 3 pillars that I try to live by because I've had the experience that you're describing, right? Backstab, catty women, jealous women, and I try to have the opposite. The people that I mentor that come around, I go by support, elevate, and celebrate. I'm gonna support you. I'm gonna elevate you, and I'm gonna celebrate you. I'm not trying to compete with anybody else. I love celebrating. I'm like, I'll go out of my way to show up for people because I want to lead by example. And if we can do that, then the girls around us, the young generation, are seeing that, and we have an opportunity to change that. I've had a lot of backstabbing from people who I thought were friends, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want none of that. That to me is not productive. I don't want to be that kind of Latina leader, Latina mentor in any way, shape, or form because I've had that experience. Right. And the only way we do it is by changing how we treat others and also reminding them there's no need for that. I tell people, I want to teach you whatever I know. And if I don't know, I'll learn it and still teach you because I want you to be better than me. If I could develop them and they go in to be successful, I feel like I'm a mom sending my kids to college and I'm so excited. I had a little bit of influence in that person's life and she's out there paying it forward. I get really excited with that. I'm not competing. To me, it's like, if I could do that with everybody else, I come across even better. But unfortunately, we're not going to come across with everybody like that. There's people that are naturally toxic and we have to avoid them, right? And we have to find a way to avoid them. That's my way of thinking. And I think it's what's working right now with the girls that I mentor.
Yeah, then that's what we all should be doing that. To be very candid, if we should be training our replacements is the way I see it, right? Across the board. For me, obviously for both men and women, but specifically for me, it's starting with the younger generations outside of my department, right? The high school, the college girls, the high school girls, the 8th graders. You know, you talked earlier about this gentleman that works with youth that is homeless. That is a very vulnerable population. They are very, their exposure to the underworld or the dark world is so within reach for them. They become victims of human trafficking, of prostitution,
Drugs.
of drugs, you know, and they start getting primed very early by pimps, right? Their boyfriends. And it's all, and, you know, they're brainwashing, essentially what they do when they start trafficking these young ladies. So for me, that is a very influential stage to get involved in. That's why we're part of Perkins, but 2, it's really reaching out to those young ladies and letting them know there is a world outside of the world that they're living in, you know, and everything is temporary, and finding them the help that they need and the resources that they need so they can move forward. Well, them and their parents, right, can move forward. And I think that's really where we can start changing a lot of that culture, that help each other, that teamwork building, that it's okay to help and cheer each other on instead of trying to take them down. Friendly competition is always good, but not when it becomes toxic competition.
Agree. And I'm glad that you're saying that because as I was talking about you, I'm excited about this episode today and I'm not going to share them again. I have an episode that I'm recording with you today and meeting one of the ladies yesterday. She's like, I want to do an episode. And she's also a survivor of a lot of things. I said, let's talk. And I couldn't help when I'm talking to them and knowing you, my brain is spinning. I go, I need to get these incredible women together because I do believe that you get women together that are powerful and powerhouses, man, we can solve all the problems in the world. If you just put the egos to the side and find solutions And that's where I was when I having the conversation. And he was explaining to me, not the positive side of the experience they've been dealing with police officers. And that's understandable. Not all of that sometimes is positive, right? In both sides. But we can still have a conversation and maybe from that conversation create opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist if you don't have a sit down to talk and be
Yeah.
open-minded, right? And
And
so that's what I was getting
understanding.
at.
Yeah, and really have an understanding, because unfortunately, a lot of people only see police officers when police officers take mom and dad to jail, or the kids get placed in foster care, or you name it. It's the negative side, the really difficult part of our job that they see, and it's perceived like that's the guy that took my mom or my dad or my kid away or whatever to protect them. We're like, whoa, look, we're just trying to protect you from you, or your child from you, or whatever, but people don't see it that way. And I think there has to be an understanding of the whys. Why do we do these things? Right. And really what the law says, and understanding that we have to follow the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And then there's a group there. I mean, and I'll give you a little bit more information of the episode of these incredible women, because the fortunate thing is a lot of nonprofits, right? Because through their own trauma, they're creating groups because they wish they had someone helping them. And since they didn't have that, they're creating now groups or nonprofits to help those that they know that can help because nobody was there to help them. And I find that, like, what do you need from me? I'm like, let me introduce you with so and so. And that's kind of like what I'm doing. I'm like pairing everybody up, and I'm like, let's figure out how we can help each other and create a bigger community within this inner Niña, because ultimately we're healing each other and we're healing others, right? So that's kind of like, it was a fun meeting. And just to share, you were part of I was thinking about you even yesterday before this episode. I was talking about you without mentioning your name, but I was like giving you props. And so anyways, I'm going to have you connect with these incredible women. So I know there's a lot of things you need to do to stay motivated, but what motivates you on a general, not just work, but in general in life?
I think change motivates me. It's the constant redefining myself, the constant I don't want to say reinventing, but just making that machine, fine-tuning the machine and the brain. I think for work, it's always making my department better, always making our officers better, whether it's through training, whether it's through community engagement, whether it's just serving them directly. Officers, I know, despite the public opinion of law enforcement, our officers go through a lot. And people don't see that, right? They see the uniform, but they don't see what's behind that uniform, behind the badge. And really, it's being there for them. And one of the things that I did was that really motivated me was I have to turn. When I took over the department, our department was in trauma holistically. I don't know if you know this story, but when in 2021, our chief at the time left. He left to go to another agency, and it was very sudden. So we all kind of felt a little bit betrayed. Now we're floundering. We got to figure this out. Who's going to be the next chief, the assistant chief, and so on and so forth. So the assistant chief at that time then became an acting chief, and they appointed me as acting assistant chief. And my boss at the time said, we're going to make you final. We're going to appoint you. And that appointment was supposed to happen in February of 2022. In February, my chief and his wife were involved in a car accident where she passed away. And they had been part of our department for 33 years. So it was, once again, getting that carpet ripped out from underneath us. And then I was like, Jesus, I'm an acting assistant chief. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not ready, right? Like, who's going to take over? And my boss said, you are it. You can do this. You have what it takes. Like, you're the right person. I'm like, oh my God. Right. So now what? What are we going to do? How do we move this department forward? How do our people heal? How does our community heal? And how are officers' resilience is very important. How are they going to become resilient to serve our community with what our community needs are and be there when the call comes in to serve them 100%? Right. So for me, that was how do I took it on my shoulders, but how do I get my department better? So I focused inward, and that really was what sparked my motivation of like, wellness has to be a priority. Treating them and treating our community as the people, as the humans with true emotions and true feelings that we are, that became a priority, right? We're not robotics. We're not just uniforms. We're people first. So my priority was to merge our department because we were very segregated when it came to the police officers and then our records and then our dispatchers and then very segregated. We were all like little groups within one department. And my first thing was, we're one. I don't care how you slice it or dice it, we're one. One is going through trauma, we're all going with you. So that changed, and that really motivated me to start doing different things that otherwise would have never been done, because we were very top heavy down to the department. So with that, a lot of changes came in. I was able to establish a full-time wellness program where we have 5 chaplains that come in and do work with our organization. We have a dog that one of our chaplains has that our foundation supports. Our foundation restructured. We have the San Diego Harbor Police Foundation. They're instrumental. They go out there. They raise a lot of money primarily for officer wellness, right? And I was able to contract therapists, full-time therapists to deal with our officers. I had 2 officers a year ago that dealt with 12 suicides off the bridge, right, in a short amount of time. So, we have officers. I think I had 4 or 5 officers that responded to the shooting recently, right? And one of them was first on scene. So those things build up 20 years of that trauma. We need to help our officers. So that's really what motivated me, is how can I provide my officers the best services? Because I work for them. They work for our community. Make sure that they are 100% ready to go in all aspects of their job. I have created a wellness program where it talks about your mental health, your physical health, your financial health, right? Your dietary needs. All those things are key pillars on making you a very resilient police officer. So that's what motivates me when I show up to work every day. How am I going to be the best I can to support my entire team, from our records to our dispatchers? Because everybody seems to forget about our dispatchers, right? And they're the first ones that take that 911 call. They're the first ones that hear that person scream for help. We can't forget about them. Our records team reviews reports. They see the body-worn cameras. They look at all that stuff and create those images in their head that create secondary trauma that, they need to process. We can't forget about our people. And at the end, I have services. Well, not I do, but our department has services to help members of our community that go through the trauma. That's what our chaplains are there for as well. So that's what I care about. That's what gets me up every morning. I work with great people. We were talking about, men and women and how women get put to the side, or although my assistant chief, people come to him first. I got to say, he's a huge advocate of women. He has seen firsthand what I've gone through. He's been there with me when I've gone through some of that. So I appreciate that, and having that team to support you in that regard definitely helps to accomplish what I want to accomplish, which is the wellness for my department and our community. So
Thank
that's
you
what
for
motivates
saying
me at
that.
work.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm amazed the things that you just shared with us, because you're humanizing these men and women in uniform. And I think we need a little bit more of those stories, because people tend to forget there's a human behind or inside a uniform, right? And to your point, they're the ones dealing with trauma. And you've served in the military as well to know that, there's PTSD related to dealing with traumatic experiences. And just like the military, the police officers don't always get the help that they need to
Yep.
deal with the things that they witness on a daily basis. I don't have the stomach, the heart, or anything related to be able to do that kind of job. That's why there's a specialty for those roles. That's why I'm HR. I'm more into there's no trauma there. There's
Oh, there's
some
trauma in HR. There's
psychiatry, psychology to deal with, but not the level where you're going in and you see bodies. And that's a different level of stress and trauma. But the fact that you're thinking outside the box to provide your team that support that typically is not offered, but because you're able to relate and you're putting yourself in their shoes, you actually are bringing that extra care for them. And I wish there was more stories out there of the things that our police officers have to deal with, so people maybe can see the human piece, right?
Yeah. It's and here's that sometimes people forget. Police officers have to take this stuff with them, right? They see it, it's in their brain, it's in their heart, it's in their soul. I can tell you stories. I responded to a call where an 8-year-old kid, drowned in a pool. And when they tell you the eyes are windows to a person's soul, 100%. And I saw that soul leave that kid's body. I knew at that time that my kids were swimming. And I called my mom. I was like, Mom, where are the kids? She's like, oh, they're in the pool. They're fine. Get them out, Mom. Get them out right now. They're going to drown. They got to get them out. Because I didn't know how to deal with that. Right. And, that's what we deal with. Especially when that incident is very close to home. Right? You tend to internalize it different. And if you don't process it out or you don't talk to somebody, and honestly, mental health in policing is brand new. It's just really coming to fruition, because when I handled that call when that 8-year-old kid drowned and I'm calling my mom, I'm calling her on the phone driving to another call. Right? Because I was like, okay, well, he's off to the hospital. We have detectives going to the hospital. I have to stay in my beat and patrol. And now I have the next call, of a lost dog or something. And now I have to go find this dog with this kid's image burning in my head. And it took me a long time, and I still get very emotional about it, because I feel as a mother, right, for that mother. And that's really hard. And those images stay with you forever. And I think people forget that, our jobs for firefighters, for police officers, for paramedics, for nurses, for doctors, it is hard.
And that's to your point, right? But we have to sometimes kind of be a little bit open to share that, because it kind of makes the person human. And I think that's something that we need to do a little bit more of, because I don't think our police officers get enough credit, especially with stuff that's going on right now. I'm glad that you're sharing that, and I'm glad that you're providing them the help that they need. I think we need to do a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I know that you've been 25 years in your current role, because you're 23 in your prior role. What's next for you now?
I'm not sure. So
you're still very young, so don't say you're about to retire. Go, my girl.
Well, retirement is on the horizon. I want our department to have succession. I want movement in the department, and that doesn't happen if sometimes at the top we don't start getting out of other people's ways. And
why, you don't plan to be there till you're 90?
No, I do not. I honestly want to do more work within the community outside of uniform, right? And have that experience that I currently have. I'm potentially going to stay on the board with the foundation to help raise funds for the department, and really to spread the word from the chief's perspective, right? On why this is so important for the work that we do. The foundation, the department adopted Perkins Elementary, but the foundation really does the magic with the finances. Our officers show up and do the work, but without the foundation, our ability to help that school is very limited. And to me, Perkins is very important. They have a great Principal Hernandez. He's a great man. He does great work for that school. And he really, he's got a heart of gold, and he knows each student by name and what their stories are. And he's a very special man, and that school is very special to me and to the department. So I want to continue doing that. I want to get a little bit more involved with MANA and continue helping out our, my community, the Latino community, and help mentor young Latinas to success as much as I can, right? These young ladies are really, really smart, really savvy, but whatever I can do to guide them.
Just showing up, it's helping up. We have a lot of activities happening. We have the LSLP, which is Latina Success Leadership Program. And
that's a great program. I went through that.
I did. I'm an alumni. So this is a 10th year. And the program has over 350 alumni and counting. There's a new cohort that's starting next month. Okay, what year?
I did 3 years ago.
I did 2022. So
we were not on the same class.
No, we were not on the same class. I would have recognized you. I did 2022. So if it's 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was about 3 years ago.
2023?
Like 3. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, it's incredible.
It's a great program.
And then we have the Latina conference. It's every other year. And so in November so I'm going to see you there. And we have equally about over 300 Latinas, hermanas coming San Diego for that conference. And it's important for the girls to see us, right? I had the honor of interviewing our co-founders of the organizations that were badass Latinas. They were part of the Chicano movements back in the 70s. And I gladly tell them that I stand on their shoulders, because they were brave back in the 70s to create this organization. And so when I mentioned to them that every year we have a new group coming up, and what I love is the fact that we have all of us in different age groups to be there to greet them and say, hey, you're not alone. And regardless of the struggles they might be having in the family or in the community, creating a bigger communities of hermanas that say, hey, I don't have the answers, but you know what? I have an hermana that's smarter and more badass, and let me reach out to her and let me put you in contact, right? It's creating that nationwide. I always tell people that my purpose is the minute I join the organization is creating an opportunity. My legacy to be is like how many people I can help before I kick the bucket. Before I can kick a bucket, I tell my kids, I'm not leaving you a trust. I'm going to leave you a scholarship and hopefully a nonprofit where you need to continue it. I don't know if they're sold into it, but I'm creating a family within my family that I'm getting with the organization that eventually someone's going to carry it for me and we can continue to pay it forward. So that's one of the things that I get out of the organization. And I wish I would have known about this organization years ago. 'Cause I would have joined when I was a teenager
Yeah,
or at least
agreed.
in my 20s. I think my journey in my career would have been a lot smoother had I had someone supporting me, cheering me on, or giving me some guidance that I needed back then. So can't do anything about the past, but I can do something about the present and the future. And that's where you and I are at the moment. So we help each other and help the generation that comes behind us. So I'm looking forward to it. So I know I'm going to see you in a couple of the events. So
Absolutely. Yep.
stay tuned on that one. So if you had a couple of maybe wisdom that you can share with our audience and who's watching and listening, what would that Magna wisdom will be?
Magda wisdom. I think I stand by, words matter, and how you leave people feeling matters means a lot to me. One, because, I've been treated poorly with, bad words, not the proverbial bad words, but words that hurt. And I think resilience is key. I don't think you and me would be where we're at without our resilience. Tomorrow will always be a brighter day and the sun is always going to come up. And I think sometimes we get short-sighted on that. And, I think you've asked me before, like, what would you tell your younger self? Is that it gets better, right? It gets better in those darkest moments when you feel alone, when you feel people have betrayed you or left you or whatever. That's when that firebird, that phoenix comes up, right? And you rise from the ashes and you're a better version of yourself. Because I truly feel if I didn't go through what I went through and those challenges and that almost killed me, right? Blood, sweat, and tears almost killed me. I wouldn't be where I am at now, and I wouldn't be a strong, independent, fighter and champion for my 3 sons as a single mother, because I raised my kids by myself. Their dads were out of the picture. Funny enough, one just started showing back up in my son's life, but whatever. I'm a very proud mother. I raised a sheriff's deputy, I raised a Phoenix firefighter, and I raised a physics major. So my 3 boys are well on their way, but none of that would have happened if I didn't have the resiliency and the ability to say, you know what, it's okay. Tomorrow, it gets better. Today, I'll sleep it off and I'll stay in bed. Tomorrow, I'll adjust my crown and we'll go conquer the world. And that's what I would tell myself, because some days was really, really dark, was really, really hard. And we can do it. And like you said, I had some strong women to support me, and some were from Mana that were there when I fell. And they said, you know what? Ines was one of them. Like, girl, you got this. You got this. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. And sometimes that's what we need.
It's funny that you said that because we're strong women, and we're strong women because we've had to be, right? Life has made us be a certain way and have to depend on ourselves. Well, I go through my struggles and I'm so used to not having anybody to lean on because I didn't have that support system growing up as a child. My family wasn't around. I didn't have a great support system even with friends. Joining the organization has given me a little bit of that support system. I've been going through and I've been sharing that with my hermana, something that I've been dealing with in the past few months. And it was hard for me to make the initial phone calls and say, hey, I'm going through this. I need some guidance. And what do you need? And automatically I get that support system. And I've never had that before. And it could be just someone that lets me vent because I'm there that you can call me and I will gladly, no question asked, I will drive no matter how far to be there. But for me to ask, sometimes it's hard for us to be the one asking. We're the ones to volunteer all day long. But our personality, sometimes it's better for us to deal everything. And we don't have to deal. That's the whole point. We don't have to go through it alone. We have a support system in place with the organization. I have been telling guests, find yourself a support system. Find yourself a group, a community, so you don't have to go through it alone. What great if we have a community of Latinas or women or whatever that may be. It could be church, but have a community that you don't have to go through it alone. So I'm glad that you and I have the same group in common because it's a support system in place. And
It
so I'm
is. It is. And you know what? I'll tell you what, like being in law enforcement at the top of the food chain, it's a very lonely place, right? Because you can't vent down, right? I'm not telling, my team what's going on. And then I am not telling my boss what's going on, right? So who do you turn to? Who do you turn to? So it's interesting for sure. But we got to stick together and we got to be there for each other. And we may not understand it, but we don't understand the professions, but we definitely understand the feelings and the emotions, right? And I can't change what is happening in your world, but I can be there to support your world.
Absolutely. One thing I've been telling the girls that I mentor is, because I don't paint a just a Care Bear picture. I tell them, look, one thing I could tell you for a fact, in this shell that you see there, but I've been going through so much. Things might be go okay for me right now, but I almost certain I'm not a betting woman, but I know in a few years God is gonna go and give me another lesson that I need to learn. It's gonna pull the rug under me, and then it's the lessons are not always for us. The lessons are also sometimes for others around us to witness us falling down and getting back up, right? That's kind of like the message I like to give, because if you think about how many battles you've had to fight since you left Nogales,
Whew.
how many times you fell and how many times you had to get back, and where you're at right now. And I could tell you, you're probably going to go through a couple more of those, because we're meant to go through those journeys, not just for us, but the ones around us, right?
Absolutely. And I think God puts people in our path for certain reasons. I think he puts certain challenges or obstacles for certain reasons, whether it's to prevent you from hurting yourself by doing something that could have been worse, and teaching you a lesson or showing you something greater than what you originally thought. And patience is one of those things that I've had to learn.
You and I were both late when they were passing out that gift.
I missed that line. I missed the
I
line of
was like, when
patience.
everybody's in line getting like the gifts, I don't know where I was, but one of the things that is part of my challenge every single day, I have to give testimony to that, is I am not the patience person. I'm very impatient. And through my recent struggles I've been going there, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm handing it over to you, because I want it now. I want instant gratification.
Yeah.
And he's like, nope, I'm going to give it to you when I want it. And so I'm learning. It's taking me all these years for me to realize I can't push. I can't speed up the process. If he has a plan for me, I just have to let go and let God, kind of thing. That's kind of like my mantra now, let go and let God. Can't control it, but that's kind of like my weakness. And I'm like, I want it now. And I'm like, out of my control. I can't do anything. I was too busy in another line, and that's kind of like my struggle. So, I have to.
I wouldn't call it a weakness. I would call it a strength that you haven't fully developed.
True. I love that way to see it. I don't know if I want to develop, because I do things like this. I want like instant, but I'm also the same thing that I'm impatient is more where I'm very action driven. That makes sense? So
it makes
works.
sense. It works because you're action driven, but when you're required to have patience, you can only control what you can control, right?
Yes.
And that for me is the hardest thing, because I am balls to the wall all the time, and I've had to learn to slow down and control what I can control, because I wanted to control everything and everybody, what they like. Nope, you're doing it wrong. It's just easier if I do it myself or whatever. And I had to learn that a lot of the hard ways, right? But it's still a work in progress, like you. But yeah, I'm switching my words from saying, oh, it's my weakness, to saying, you know what, it's a strength I haven't developed yet.
I love that. I'm gonna borrow it.
Yeah, it's an
okay?
underdeveloped strength, because I think we always focus on the negative, and we focus on things as weaknesses, like, oh, my weakness is this. I'm like, is it really a weakness, or is it a strength you just haven't really fully developed? Because we tend to ask people, even in job interviews, like, I don't like asking like, oh, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Well, why can't they all be strengths? Some more developed than others, because then I know what strengths to help you with.
When I'm interviewing, I ask, what are your strengths and what are your areas of opportunities?
Yeah.
Because we're always growing, we're always developing, and that's an opportunity to get better, right? I just haven't really applied that to me as I need to start using that approach for me. I'm a work in progress, even at this age, so which is good, right? So if I'm not learning, I'm dying. So I'm going to keep learning. So, but on that note, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for making time, sharing your story, being vulnerable, and being with us here in our Inner Niña community. To our listeners, thank you for listening and making time for me. I'm Maria Benitez, and this is our journey together. Until next time, thank you. Thank you, Manita.
Thank you, Maria.
you for listening. Thank you for holding space for me. And thank you for allowing me to walk beside you as you heal your inner Niña. Until next time, please don't forget to follow and subscribe.